Spies are supposed to be masters of deception, surveillance, and staying completely invisible. Apparently, nobody told these people. From forgotten aliases and fake rocks to weaponized cats and classified documents flying off car roofs, these are 30 spy missions destroyed by terrible planning, bad luck, and decisions so stupid they almost deserve their own intelligence agency. 1. In 1983, an East German spy reportedly decided that tiny cameras and microfilm were far too subtle. His solution was to carry a portable photocopier into a NATO office disguised as a lunchbox. Unfortunately, this lunchbox needed electricity, had wires sticking out of it, and made the gentle lunchtime sound of an industrial lawnmower. When a coworker asked what was buzzing under the desk, the agent claimed it was a sandwich warmer. A heroic explanation, especially since sandwiches rarely produce copies of classified defense plans. The operation lasted only a few days. Someone eventually opened the box while looking for food and found machinery, documents, and enough suspicious wiring to decorate a spy museum. The agent was caught because his secret device looked less like Tupperware and more like a toaster designed by the Soviet space program. 2. During the Cold War, one field agent received a very clear emergency instruction. If capture looked likely, burn the classified documents. Simple. Unfortunately, when police sirens approached his compromised safe house, he discovered that he had packed the secrets, but forgotten every known method of creating fire. No matches, no lighter, nothing. He tried the kitchen stove, which refused to cooperate, then reportedly attempted to rub sticks together like a panicked caveman with government clearance. Finally, with enemy agents almost at the door, he dumped the papers into a trash bin and hoped the laws of evidence would take the evening off. They did not. The documents were recovered perfectly intact. Years of training, false identities, coded messages, and operational planning had been defeated by an item available at nearly every corner shop. 3. Russian agents living undercover in the United States during the illegals program used coded phrases and indirect communication to avoid openly discussing their assignments. Clever in theory, but less impressive once the Federal Bureau of Investigation had already decoded the system and was quietly listening for the trigger words. One phrase as harmless as "the weather is lovely today" could signal that a meeting, transfer, or other action was ready. The problem was that harmless phrases stop being harmless when investigators know exactly what they mean. After years of surveillance, hidden cameras, intercepted messages, and monitored exchanges, the network was arrested in 2010. The agents had built fake lives, raised families, developed careers, and blended into ordinary American neighborhoods. Then the whole performance collapsed because their secret language had become about as secret as a restaurant menu being read aloud on the radio. 4. The CIA's plans against Fidel Castro often sounded less like intelligence operations and more like rejected cartoon scripts. Among the most famous ideas was a cigar designed to explode near his face. Castro was known for smoking cigars, so someone apparently concluded that the easiest path to regime change was weaponized tobacco. Other proposals involved contaminated diving equipment, poisoned cigars, and chemicals intended to damage his public image. The exploding cigar never reached Castro, which was fortunate for him and deeply embarrassing for everyone who had discussed it seriously in a government office. The plan depended on secretly placing the device inside his personal supply and then hoping he selected that exact cigar. He did not. Millions of dollars, international tension, and trained operatives were involved, yet the strategy still came down to crossing fingers beside a box of smoking accessories. 5. British intelligence once dispatched an undercover operative to the Middle East, even though he had almost no useful Arabic. He was expected to build contacts, collect information, and move through local communities without attracting attention. Instead, he depended on a pocket phrasebook, frantic gestures, and the confidence of a tourist who had accidentally wandered into an intelligence operation. He reportedly mixed up basic expressions, misunderstood questions, and once greeted a shopkeeper with a phrase closer to "Where is my goat?" than "Good morning." Nothing says reliable local businessman like demanding livestock before breakfast. Residents quickly realized that his accent, vocabulary, and behavior did not match his cover story. Authorities began watching him. His meetings became risky, and the operation collapsed within days. Apparently, language training had been treated as an optional extra, like choosing whether the spy needed legroom on the flight. 6. During World War II, Germany sent agents into Britain carrying radios, money, forged documents, sabotage equipment, and detailed instructions. One parachuted into the countryside with nearly everything required for a covert mission, including a map that immediately ruined the disguise. The entire map was printed in German. Place names, symbols, notes, and explanations all looked perfectly reasonable for someone claiming to be a harmless Belgian traveler, assuming the harmless Belgian traveler worked directly for German intelligence. British police stopped him near a rural railway station and inspected his belongings. The forged identity already raised questions, but the German map answered them with the subtlety of a marching band. He was arrested before completing his assignment, and investigators soon began tracing the contacts he had been meant to meet. Excellent preparation, except for the tiny detail of making the spy kit look exactly like a spy kit. 7. A North Korean operative once attempted to enter South Korea under the deeply convincing cover of a disc jockey promoting cultural exchange. He carried mixtapes, business cards, and enough forced enthusiasm to power a bad nightclub opening. According to the story, the cards identified him as DJ Freedom, a name so discreet it might as well have included his intelligence rank. His music choices were several years behind current trends, and some songs were reportedly banned in North Korea, creating the awkward impression that he had researched neither side of the border. At a karaoke venue, he allegedly approached potential recruits with the elegant question, "Do you like secrets?" Authorities arrested him during an event and found equipment hidden inside a keyboard stand. The plan was to win over young people through music and quietly gather information. Instead, he proved that even espionage can die from secondhand embarrassment. 8. In the 1970s, a CIA officer in Europe was supposed to signal a contact by placing a duck sticker on a particular park bench. Duck meant the operation was active. No duck meant stay away. This was simple enough until the officer accidentally bought a goose sticker and decided that ornithological accuracy was probably not important in international espionage. He stuck the goose on the bench and left. The contact arrived, saw no duck, and correctly assumed the meeting had been canceled. Meanwhile, 2 children reportedly removed the goose because they thought it was a prize. Headquarters later tried to understand why the exchange had failed, and the officer defended himself by arguing that a goose was basically a duck with a longer neck. That may be acceptable at a family picnic. It is less useful when an entire covert operation depends on identifying one specific water bird. 9. A KGB agent in the 1980s received the complete undercover package: forged passport, invented profession, detailed personal history, and a new name. Unfortunately, he forgot the new name at the exact moment someone asked for it. At a checkpoint, an officer requested his identity, and the agent panicked. First, he gave his real name. Then, after realizing the passport disagreed, he offered a completely different third name, because apparently the best response to one suspicious answer is another suspicious answer. Guards detained him immediately and searched his luggage. Inside a false compartment, they discovered equipment linked to espionage, transforming an awkward memory lapse into a full arrest. Months of preparation ended in seconds because the operative had not rehearsed the first sentence of his cover story. Secret identities can involve complex documents, coded contacts, and elaborate legends, but step 1 remains surprisingly basic. Remember what you are called. 10. 1. CIA officer sent to Eastern Europe managed to damage his cover during his first day by calling his mother from the hotel telephone. He used his real name, spoke loudly in English, mentioned the city, and explained that his work was about to begin. The hotel was already known to be monitored by a local counterintelligence, so this was less a private family call and more a free intelligence briefing with affectionate closing remarks. Investigators traced the conversation, placed him under constant surveillance, and watched to see where he went. The agency did not remove him immediately, which allowed the situation to become even worse. He eventually led the watchers toward a contact meeting and endangered the broader network. His mother probably appreciated hearing that he had arrived safely. His handlers probably preferred that the enemy had not received the same update. 11. An undercover operative in a small European village chose birdwatching as his cover. It seemed perfect. Binoculars explained why he stared into the distance. A notebook explained why he wrote things down. And rare birds provided a reason to stand near restricted buildings for hours. The problem appeared when an actual birdwatcher approached and tried to discuss birds. Asked what species he was observing, the agent reportedly answered, "The red one." The local enthusiast requested more detail about habitat, calls, and markings. The operative mumbled something about wings and escaped before the conversation became an exam. Suspicious, the birdwatcher reported him to the authorities. Investigators connected his movements to nearby surveillance targets, and he was detained. The man had prepared equipment, signals, and observation schedules, but apparently nobody had taught him the difference between a sparrow and a decorative garden ornament. 12. One would-be American spy decided to contact the Soviet embassy by mailing anonymous letters offering classified military information for cash. To prove he was serious, he included genuine samples. To prove he was terrible at secrecy, he used the same invented name in both letters and mailed them from the same small town. The pattern was so obvious that Soviet officers reportedly wondered whether the offer was an American trap. It was not. He had simply created the espionage equivalent of an online advertisement featuring his face, address, and workplace. Federal investigators eventually learned about the letters and traced them without needing an elaborate undercover operation. Postal records, handwriting, and basic geography did most of the work. The man was arrested before causing greater damage. He wanted to become a mysterious international asset, but his security system could have been defeated by an attentive mail carrier and a map. 13. In the 1980s, a French operative received a classic intelligence assignment: charm an embassy official, gain trust, and obtain access to sensitive documents. The dinners were romantic, the conversation was carefully guided, and the relationship appeared to be progressing exactly as planned. Unfortunately, the agent selected the target's own office as the main location for this delicate operation. That office was under constant surveillance. Cameras recorded arrivals, microphones captured conversations, and security personnel tracked movement throughout the building. French intelligence later discovered that the other side had observed the entire affair from the beginning. The agent obtained no useful secrets, while the opposition collected plenty of recordings. It was a remarkable reversal. Instead of using romance to penetrate a secure institution, he had essentially performed the mission for the institution's security department. Candlelight may create atmosphere, but it does not disable microphones hidden in the walls. 14. The CIA experimented with using pigeons as aerial surveillance platforms by attaching tiny cameras to their bodies and releasing them near sensitive locations. Pigeons could fly over areas that aircraft might not safely approach, and nobody usually questioned a bird sitting on a roof. The difficulty was that pigeons had not signed the mission plan. Some flew in the wrong direction, some landed early, and others returned with footage consisting mainly of sky, feathers, and architectural details nobody had requested. One bird reportedly disappeared near a chimney. Another reached the target, but produced images so poor that analysts gained little from them. The project demonstrated impressive engineering and very limited control over the employee. A pigeon cannot be threatened with demotion, reminded about national security, or asked why half the film contains its own wing. Nature had entered the intelligence business and immediately ignored management. 15. One Cold War operative hid a roll of microfilm inside the hollow heel of his shoe. It was elegant spycraft right up to the moment he stumbled inside an airport. The heel split open, and the tiny cylinder skittered across the floor directly in front of customs officers. Everyone stared at the object, then at the nervous man wearing the shoe that had just produced secret film like a broken vending machine. Security detained him before he reached the aircraft and inspected the rest of his luggage. The hidden material, false compartments, and suspicious travel story quickly exposed the operation. His carefully designed smuggling method had survived planning, testing, and international transport, but not one badly placed foot. There is a reason reliable equipment matters. If your entire intelligence network can be revealed by tripping over your own shoelace, the technology may need another round of development. 16. A Soviet operative working in the West decided that the perfect disguise required a large fake mustache. Unfortunately, the mustache looked fake from across the street and repeatedly peeled away whenever the weather became windy. Shopkeepers noticed it. Neighbors laughed about it. One witness said it appeared to be attached with something resembling chewing gum. Instead of removing the ridiculous facial decoration, the operative continued appearing in the same neighborhood with the same mustache, gradually becoming the most recognizable, supposedly anonymous man in town. Surveillance officers began tracking his routine and eventually followed him to a dead drop. He was arrested during an exchange. Without the disguise, he might have blended into the crowd. With it, he looked like a stage villain who had escaped during intermission. Sometimes the safest undercover strategy is not wearing something that demands its own police description. 17. A CIA officer operating near Gibraltar boarded a small boat to dispose of sensitive material sealed inside a waterproof bag. The plan was simple: reach the correct point, drop the package, and leave. Instead, he released it too early and watched it drift away in open water. Then came the additional problem. He could not swim. The officer stood helplessly on deck while the bag carried codes, equipment, or documents farther from reach. People around the docks later reported a nervous foreigner offering money to anyone who found a mysterious package washing ashore, which is not the traditional method for keeping an operation quiet. The material was never recovered. Losing secrets at sea was already bad enough. Having to explain that the rescue failed because the assigned officer had never learned basic swimming turned a security incident into a professional comedy with very expensive consequences. 18. During one Cold War dead drop, an agent buried microfilm in a remote forest and relied entirely on memory to find it later. He noted a pine tree, a patch of dirt, and several natural landmarks, apparently forgetting that forests contain many pine trees and nearly unlimited dirt. When he returned days later, every location looked familiar and none looked correct. He began digging in one spot after another, leaving disturbed ground across the area like a confused treasure hunter. The longer he searched, the more obvious the activity became. Enemy counterintelligence eventually noticed the damage, located the package, and traced the operation. The agent had successfully transported the material, selected a secluded site, and concealed it underground. Then he defeated his own system by failing to mark the location clearly. The greatest threat was not advanced surveillance technology. It was forgetting which tree had looked special on Tuesday. 19. One operative decided that the safest place for his cipher codes was the label sewn inside his underwear. His reasoning was simple: no polite customs officer would search there. Unfortunately, intelligence work often involves people who are professionally impolite. During a routine inspection, officials noticed unusual stiffness in his clothing and conducted a more careful search. They found numbers and code information written on the fabric. The agent claimed they were laundry instructions, which would have been more convincing if washing symbols usually included secret communication sequences. He was detained, questioned, and exposed. Later, intelligence officers reportedly debated whether the method had been inventive or merely desperate. The concept did offer privacy, but it also meant that one thorough search revealed both the operative and his entire communication system at the same time. Some secrets should not be stored where dignity is the first layer of encryption. 20. In 2006, British intelligence was exposed using an electronic device disguised as a rock in Moscow. Agents could approach the object and transfer information wirelessly without opening a visible container. The technology was clever. The human behavior around it was not. Russian security officers noticed the same people repeatedly walking past one particular patch of ground, slowing down, pausing, and sometimes awkwardly kicking the fake stone when the connection failed. Surveillance cameras recorded the routine until the purpose became obvious. Russian television later broadcast footage of the agents circling the rock with all the natural behavior of people pretending not to care about a rock. Britain initially denied the accusation, but the operation became impossible to defend. The device had been designed to disappear into the landscape. Unfortunately, the operatives treated it like a broken office printer that needed repeated tapping. 21. A CIA officer once placed a briefcase containing sensitive documents on the roof of his car while unlocking the door. Then he got inside and drove away. The case slid off during the journey and was found by a pedestrian who expected cash or valuables. Instead, he opened it and discovered documents marked as highly classified. He turned the material over to local police, and the story reached journalists before the agency even realized anything was missing. When questioned, the officer admitted that he had placed the case on the roof many times before. This was apparently meant as a defense, although it mostly proved that international security had survived repeated rounds of an unnecessary game. The documents exposed information about surveillance programs and created a public embarrassment. Decades of spy training could not overcome one ancient rule of driving: remove important objects from the roof first. 22. A Western operative sent to blend into a rural Eastern European village arrived dressed like a city executive heading to an important financial meeting. He wore polished shoes, a trench coat, and carried a formal briefcase through muddy farming roads. Everyone else wore practical clothes suited to agricultural work, so the stranger became instantly fascinating. Villagers followed him, questioned him, and wondered why a businessman was wandering near fields and local government buildings. He claimed to be a traveling accountant, but he barely understood the language and knew almost nothing about local customs. Suspicion spread faster than any intelligence report. Authorities were notified, his movements were monitored, and the assignment collapsed before meaningful contact was established. The goal had been to disappear into the community. Instead, he looked like Wall Street had taken a wrong turn and arrived searching for quarterly profits among the potatoes. 23. In the 1960s, the CIA launched Project Acoustic Kitty, an attempt to transform a living cat into a mobile listening device. Engineers implanted a microphone, transmitter, and antenna so the animal could approach conversations without attracting suspicion. The technical work was extraordinary. The behavioral plan depended on a cat obeying instructions, which was the less extraordinary part. During early testing, the animal became distracted, wandered away from intended routes, and showed little concern for Soviet intelligence priorities. A popular account claims the first field cat was killed by a taxi shortly after release, although later versions of the story dispute that detail. What is certain is that the project consumed years of effort and produced no practical intelligence system. The CIA had built advanced electronics small enough to fit inside a cat, but had not solved the older problem of convincing a cat to care. 24. Soviet spies in the United States used hollow coins to conceal tiny pieces of microfilm. The containers looked ordinary and could pass unnoticed through pockets, shops, and public places. That was the advantage. The disadvantage was that they also looked ordinary to the agents carrying them. In one famous case, a hollow nickel entered circulation by mistake and was given to a newspaper delivery boy in 1953. When he dropped it, the coin split open and revealed coded material inside. The Federal Bureau of Investigation examined the message but could not immediately decode it. Years later, information from captured Soviet agent Reino Hyhenen helped investigators connect the coin to a wider network, contributing to the exposure of spy Rudolf Abel. An elaborate covert system had been cracked because someone treated specialized espionage equipment exactly like spare change. 25. One courier attempted to transport microfilm inside a waterproof capsule hidden beneath his tongue. The emergency plan was to swallow it only if authorities stopped him. Unfortunately, during the flight, he became nervous, took a drink, gagged, and swallowed the capsule long before reaching customs. The secret information was now protected by the least convenient security system imaginable: his digestive tract. Agents had to decide whether to delay the mission, seek medical help, or wait for nature to complete the delivery. What followed reportedly involved doctors, laxatives, repeated inspections, and a level of professional humiliation not usually mentioned in recruitment brochures. The capsule was eventually recovered, but the operational window had closed. The method had been designed to prevent enemy officers from seizing the material. Instead, it prevented almost everyone, including the courier's own side, from accessing it when needed. 26. In 2000, a British intelligence officer stationed in Colombia reportedly compromised a safe house by ordering pizza to the address under his real name. He was operating in an environment filled with surveillance, armed groups, and hostile intelligence interests, yet hunger apparently defeated every security procedure. The delivery information was intercepted. The name was connected to British government records, and the location quickly became unsafe. Assets had to be moved, plans were abandoned, and the operation was closed. Secure houses normally depend on false identities, indirect supply routes, and carefully controlled contact. This one was exposed through a pepperoni order and a telephone call. The officer had access to professional tradecraft, but chose the same method used by students during a late evening study session. Espionage requires patience, discipline, and secrecy. It also occasionally requires accepting that dinner may be disappointing. 27. A CIA officer stationed in Eastern Europe during the Cold War entered a bar for one drink and left, having practically delivered his own intelligence file to the opposition. After several rounds of vodka, he began telling the bartender that he was not an ordinary American and had extremely important work. Then he lowered his voice and announced that he worked in intelligence, because whispering apparently turns a confession into a secret. He even displayed a coded note and challenged the bartender to understand it. The bartender happened to be a KGB informant. Counterintelligence placed the officer under surveillance, followed his meetings, identified contacts, and gradually damaged the entire network. The operation had survived hostile territory, careful planning, and professional scrutiny. It did not survive alcohol, combined with the human desire to impress a stranger who was being paid to listen. 28. The CIA spent years developing invisible inks for covert communication, but one formula reportedly performed its job with excessive enthusiasm. The writing appeared under the correct treatment, then faded so rapidly that the recipient could read only part of the message before the rest disappeared. During a time-sensitive operation, an agent heated the paper as instructed and watched the first lines emerge. Before he could finish, the remaining words dissolved back into the fibers. There was no duplicate, no quick way to request clarification, and no secure telephone number for asking what sentence 2 had said. The mission stalled, and an asset was left without essential instructions. Invisible ink is useful because enemies cannot see it. It becomes less useful when allies cannot see it either. The technology achieved perfect secrecy by hiding the message from every person involved. 29. In the late 1970s, United States Army Sergeant David Lewis reportedly tried to sell military secrets by walking directly into the Soviet embassy in Washington while still wearing his uniform. He asked to speak with someone important and offered information for money. Soviet officials suspected a trap and sent him away. Lewis returned with an envelope marked confidential because nothing calms suspicious intelligence officers like a stranger repeatedly arriving with government documents. After several attempts, he handed over genuine material. American investigators later uncovered his activities, helped by the fact that he discussed them openly and behaved with almost no operational caution. He imagined himself beginning a profitable career in espionage. The Soviets initially viewed him as too obvious to trust. His greatest disguise was apparently the belief that nobody would suspect a soldier openly carrying secrets into an enemy embassy. 30. In the early 2000s, a Russian operative living undercover in the United States reportedly used a public library computer for covert communication. Instead of encrypted equipment or carefully rotated devices, he returned to the same terminal used by students, job seekers, and teenagers playing games. He stored messages inside unsent email drafts so another agent could open the same account and read them without sending anything. The method had some advantages, but his repetitive behavior attracted attention. Library staff noticed that he stayed for long periods, accessed the same account, and rarely printed or visibly completed normal work. The pattern was reported, investigators began monitoring the computer, and his communications were eventually traced. Years of training and an expensive false identity were weakened by free internet access, and a librarian who paid attention. Never underestimate public servants with excellent pattern recognition. Now it is your turn to expose the intelligence community. Which unbelievably stupid spy failure did we miss? And which story on this list sounds too ridiculous to be real? Name it in the comments and defend your choice, because the best forgotten disaster may end up in a future video. And if watching trained professionals lose to pigeons, pizza, and fake mustaches entertained you, hit like and subscribe.